Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. I hope you had a great day. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories, where people conform to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and for hitting the like button. Today we have 4 great stories. The first story is called Who is Your Boss? During the 2008 recession, I had lost my job. One of my friends managed a Blockbuster Video and was able to get me working there a few nights a week. He rarely came in at night and it was managed by a younger employee that we will call Chelsea. Chelsea was 19 and I was 31 at the time. Chelsea did a great job running things when my friend wasn't there and really knew her stuff. She really enjoyed her job and the customers really liked her. One night I'm checking in returns and I hear a lady getting really frustrated with her. She was wanting her to waive a ton of late fees and credit her for a movie that she said was terrible. We definitely didn't credit people for movies because they didn't like them, and sometimes they would credit late fees. She pleaded her case to Chelsea for 15 to 20 minutes and Chelsea continued to explain that she's had too many credits already. As I'm putting movies back in stock, I feel a tap on my shoulder. It's the same lady and she insists that I help her. I walk up to the front and sit next to Chelsea. I play dumb and ask what's going on. She points at me and looks Chelsea dead in the eye and says, "He can help me since you won't." I ask her what's going on and make her explain everything over again for 15 minutes. As soon as she's done, I tell her that I would need to talk to my boss before I can get that approved. She asks, "Well, who is your boss then?" I look her dead in her eye and point right at Chelsea. That lady stomped out the door so fast and we never saw her again. The next story is called Just Following Your Instructions. I work in a bio lab, working with cells and whatnot. I have about 3 years of experience and of the 2 labs where I work right now, one of them has very strict rules while the other is rather relaxed. There's also a technician here whose only job it seems is to see if I'm wearing a lab coat. Honestly feels like that. I don't interact with them much other than that. The kicker here is that the lab coats are only supposed to be worn inside the designated rooms. You cannot wear them in common areas or anywhere outside the lab. If you do, the lab coats need to be washed and cleaned, and other than that, it can become an administrative hassle. I respect laboratory rules, but sometimes it's a bit too much. So this day, I'm in the lab just checking if the microscope computer is on so I can fetch some data. Checked, it was on, so then I was okay, let's get the hard disk. I was definitely not wearing the lab coat at this point. As I'm leaving the lab, this technician like a magical gnome jumps out of nowhere and starts questioning me as to why I'm not wearing a lab coat. Before I can even say a word, they go off on a whole new tirade about the rules and whatnot. Cue malicious compliance. All I asked was, "You sure you want me to wear a lab coat?" Response, "Yes, don't make me repeat myself." So being a nice obedient person, I put on the lab coat, exit the lab and start walking to my office. 2 seconds haven't passed and I hear absolute shrieking from behind me about what I'm doing. I looked back and informed her, "Hey, I'm just following your instructions." They soon got my boss involved, who could only laugh and basically asked me not to pull moves like this anymore. The technician is now officially off my back. It helps that they had to get the lab coat washed and cleaned and return it to me. The third story is called Only IT Has Access to It. This happened at my last job back in 2018. To give some background, I was working as a data analyst at a company in the education tech sector. For one of my projects, I created a report that we could give to the sales team that they could then use when asking clients to renew their contract. Clients were typically school systems or individual schools. The report was all graphs, even adults like pretty pictures, and it showed the client data on how teachers and students were using the product. Then our sales guys could show, hey, X% of your students and teachers are using this X times a week, so you should sign a new contract with us. I developed this report for our biggest client and had the top people in sales all put in input when developing it. The big client renewed, which was great. They loved the report and wanted to use it for all renewals, and we had 5,000 plus clients. I had to automate the process and everything seemed peachy until I had a problem. The data for the report was pulled from our database. Now I was in the research department and I did not have access to the database. Instead, our IT team had access to the database. If I wanted data, I had to put in a ticket, name all the data points I wanted, and I could only name one client per ticket. Also, IT did their work in sprints, which are basically 2-week periods of work. The tickets were always added to the next sprint, so I ended up having to wait 2 to 4 weeks for data. This was fine for the big client report, but now that I was running this report for all renewals, the ticket system was not going to work. Now, if you have worked with sales, you know they don't typically plan out 2 to 4 weeks ahead, at least they didn't at this company. I reached out to IT and requested direct access to the database, so I could stop putting in tickets and just get the data myself. That was immediately denied. All data requests will be filled by only IT, and as a research person, I needed to stay in my lane. You might see where this is going. I wasn't happy and sales wasn't happy with the delay, but there was nothing anyone could do. So I reached out to one of the sales managers to discuss a solution. Since data was going to take 2 to 4 weeks to arrive, could he please send me everyone that has a renewal coming up in the next 2 to 4 weeks? With 5,000 plus customers, that averages about 100 renewals a week. He smiled and understood what was going on, and happily sent me a list of 400-ish clients. The IT team spends the day before a sprint planning the next sprint, and all tickets submitted before the sprint had to be completed during the next sprint. The sprint planning time was always Friday afternoon because the least amount of tickets rolled in. During the planning session, they would plan all the work for the next 2 weeks, for the next sprint. Any tickets that came in before 5 PM Friday had to be finished over the next 2 weeks. Time for some malicious compliance. Armed with my list of 400 plus clients, I figured out when the next sprint started and cleared my schedule for the day before the new IT sprint started, aka their sprint planning Friday. At about 1 ticket a minute, it was going to take about 6 hours and 40 minutes to submit all the tickets, so that's what I spent my whole Friday doing. Let's not forget they had to get the data for all the tickets during the next sprint as long as I submitted them before 5 PM on Friday. That meant they had to take care of all 400 tickets in the next 2 weeks. Plus, I submitted tickets throughout their sprint planning meeting, so they couldn't even plan for it all. If you are not tech savvy, this might not make sense to you. But if you are, let me add an extra twist to you. They used Jira at the time, and the entire IT team had the Jira app on their laptops. Most of them had push notifications set up, so they got pinged every time a ticket was submitted. I would have paid good money to be a fly on the wall during that meeting, watching a new ticket pop up about every minute. I didn't hear a peep from them at all that Friday. To their credit, Monday I started getting data from my tickets. Now, I had automated the reporting process on my end, so each report only took me a few minutes to run. I was churning out reports as quickly as I received the data without an issue, and sales was loving it. I saw tickets coming in from every member of the IT team, and during the second week many tickets came in after working hours. So obviously they were struggling to keep up. Again, I will give them full credit, they fulfilled every single ticket. But there were a lot of long days for them. And everyone was salary, so no overtime pay either. This is of course on top of all the other tickets they needed to complete, so it was quite a stressful sprint. Undeterred, I met with the sales manager again right before the next sprint and asked for the next set of clients with renewals. Then, the day before the next sprint, I began submitting tickets again. My workday started at 9 AM, and by 10 AM the head of IT runs over to me. He is bug-eyed and asked me how many tickets I was planning on submitting. I told him the same amount as last time. I only had 200 this time, but he didn't know that. I'm pretty sure I saw him break on the inside. I did feel bad at this point, so I said, alternatively, you could just give me access to the database and I could query the data myself. I had access before noon. The last story is called Your Job Isn't That Hard. A long while back, I picked up a part-time job at Applebee's as a dishwasher. When I got there, I was training for a week. There were always at least 2 people washing them, and often 3 during the dinner rush. I was also trained as a cook, which isn't what I applied for, but I'm always more than happy to help when needed and do the best I can at jobs. To help understand why some of the things mentioned later matter so much when it comes to dinner rush, the cooks will absolutely need certain plates at certain times. They had to be on specific shaped and sized dishes depending on the orders. In many of the contracts for servers, they are actually required to place plates on top of each other in the dishwashing area when they drop them off. Once my training was over, after about a week, I quickly ended up being the only person on my shifts doing dishes. I was fine with this for the most part. I pride myself on working hard, efficiently and doing really well if I'm able. And I was very proud that I was able to do well enough that I didn't have to have 2 to 3 people working back there when it was my shift. The only issue which other dishwashers had was that the servers, who were all teenage girls, would just toss plates onto the area for the dishes to be washed. This caused huge issues with finding the correct plates needed when needed. And it often caused a hazard for the washers when trying to sift through these horrible piles of dishes that could easily topple over and break at any moment. This was tolerable during regular slow hours. But during a dinner rush it was a nightmare and caused a lot of stress for not only the dishwasher but also the cooks, which also would cause food to get out later than it needed to. Eventually I started to toss the plastic appetizer trays back over onto the side of the area that the waitresses walked. I hoped that they would maybe think that, oh, this stuff is actually falling all over. Maybe I should place these up here better. Nope, they just chuck it back up there and walk off. I kept this up for a while to where they finally figured out that it was happening too often for it to just be a coincidence and once saw me toss it over. We got into a very loud argument as she decided to accuse me of throwing it directly at her when she wasn't anywhere near it. So of course the manager comes in because we are yelling and things aren't getting done. She tells the girl that it is her job to place plates there properly and they needed to do it right and made sure to tell all of the waitresses this, which was nice. She told me to go ahead and take a break outside real fast to cool off. I did. For the next week all was well and right with things at work and the waitresses were doing their jobs properly. Granted, they'd make snide remarks to me as they did almost the whole time, but I couldn't ignore that. I just wanted to be able to properly do my work, and before they had to do theirs properly, I couldn't do mine, and so on for the cooks. The cooks loved that I got that done and were fairly fond of me. But it only lasts around a week and the same behavior starts back up. Obviously I start doing what I did before as well, and the same waitress gets into it with me again over it. This time though, the manager sends her off and decides to scold me because she didn't want to keep dealing with the whole issue and waitresses. I told her it's their job to do this properly and that it's hindering me from doing mine well and the cooks from doing theirs well in return. I told her that she needed to do her job and get the waitresses to do theirs properly. Her response: she said she wasn't a babysitter, that I was just OCD and that my job wasn't that hard. Big mistake on her part. It was dinner rush, and while I love to do good work, I don't tolerate being treated poorly at work and blamed for issues that aren't my fault. So I told her that if she didn't want to be a babysitter, to not hire kids that can't even do what a kindergartner can do by matching the same plates to each other, and that I was done. I walked off and went to her office to return the shoes etc. I got from the job. As I was doing this, I could hear her cursing a huge amount back in the kitchen area, trying to find 4 cooks and waitresses to do the job only I was doing during the dinner rush. I wonder where that "your job is not that hard" mentality went. Around a week later, I was at a bar and one of the cooks had come in and was talking to me, pretty much begging me to come back. But I declined. And now it's your time to shine. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories? I hope you enjoyed today's video. And I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.